Former Indiana State Trooper David Camm, acquitted of killing his family, is now going to be getting nearly $5 million in a settlement with the state of Indiana. David Camm was convicted twice for the shooting deaths of his wife and their 2 children in their Georgetown, Indiana home in the fall of 2000.
The garage door rises. It takes maybe 4 seconds, long enough for headlights to sweep the concrete floor, long enough for David Camm to see his wife. He is out of the car before it stops moving. He hits the ground beside her. He says her name. He looks at her eyes, and he already knows. Then he looks up. The family's black Ford Bronco is parked where it always parks. The passenger door is slightly open. He looks inside. His 5-year-old daughter is in the back seat, still strapped into her seatbelt. She never had time to react. Whatever happened in this garage was over before she understood it was beginning. He looks further, toward the back cargo area. His 7-year-old son is stretched toward the rear of the vehicle, arms reaching, body angled away, as though he had been climbing, scrambling, trying to put distance between himself and whatever was coming. David reaches in. Bradley is still warm. He pulls his son out onto the garage floor and starts CPR. He does not stop. He cannot stop. Because what do you do when your 7-year-old son is still warm? He keeps going until he can't anymore. Then he stands up in that garage, wife on the floor, daughter in the back seat, son in front of him. He calls the Indiana State Police, the agency where he worked for more than a decade, the people he knows by name, and is transferred to a supervisor. While the transfer processes, he is placed on hold. David Camm stood in that garage, surrounded by his entire family, and waited. When the supervisor picked up, he said, "Get everybody out here to my house now. My wife and my kids are dead." Here is what nobody could explain that night. On the roof of the Bronco, placed neatly side by side, toes pointing outward, were Kim's shoes. She had been wearing them when she came home. Someone had taken the time to remove them and set them there with care, in the middle of a crime scene involving 3 bodies. And on the garage floor beside Bradley's body, a gray sweatshirt. It did not belong to David. It did not belong to Kim. It did not belong to either of the children. Inside the collar, in faded black marker, was a single word: backbone. Both of those items would spend years ignored. What would not be ignored, what would in fact become the entire architecture of the state's case, were 8 dots of blood on a basketball shirt. Microscopic. Near the hem. 8 dots that a man with fabricated credentials would swear under oath were proof of murder. That was enough. In Floyd County, Indiana, that was enough. This is the case of David Camm, a former state trooper convicted 3 times for the murders of his wife and 2 children. Crimes committed by a man whose name, DNA, fingerprints, and signature were present at the scene from the very first night. It would take 13 years, 3 trials, and the complete dismantling of the state's forensic case before a jury finally said not guilty. If you are new here, subscribe now and hit the bell. Cases like this one only reach people when the algorithm decides they matter, and the algorithm follows you. Georgetown, Indiana, Floyd County. Population 2,227 at the 2000 census. The kind of municipality where the streets carry family names because the families never left. Lockhart Road is one of those streets. It is named after David Camm's mother's side of the family. That is how deep the roots went. Kimberly Camm was born Kimberly Wren. She was 35 years old in the fall of 2000. She had risen to senior accountant at an insurance company, a position she built through sustained competence, not accident. Her sister described her simply: Kim had gotten what she wanted. She had her white picket fence. David Camm met Kimberly Wren in 1984. He said it himself years later. "I was immediately very attracted to her. Beautiful young lady, extremely intelligent, kind, huge heart." They married in 1989. That same year, David joined the Indiana State Police, where he was eventually assigned to specialized tactical units during his tenure. By the standards of Georgetown, Indiana, they had built something substantial. Bradley came in 1993. Jill arrived in February 1995. The house on Lockhart Road went up. The careers continued. David and Kim became treasurer and anchor, respectively, of Georgetown Community Church. They were the kind of family whose absence at a church function would be noticed. In May 2000, David resigned from the state police after more than a decade of service. His uncle, Sam Lockhart, offered him a position at his waterproofing company. Better pay, predictable hours, home for dinner. Kim's sister said it again. She had gotten what she wanted. 4 months later, on a Thursday evening, Kim picked both children up from school. She took Bradley to swim practice. She brought them both home. The routine was ordinary to the point of invisibility. There was nothing about the evening of September 28, 2000, that would have told Kimberly Camm it was the last one. Bradley Camm was 7 years old. Jill Camm was 5. She was still strapped into a seatbelt when they found her. September 28, 2000 began like every other Thursday the Camm family had lived. David and Kim both worked during the day. After school, Kim collected both children, ran Bradley to swim practice, and brought them home. David left for Georgetown Community Church at approximately 7 p.m. for his regular Thursday basketball game. 11 men, rotating games, the same group of people, the same gym, the same night of the week they had been doing this for years. At approximately 7:50 p.m., a 13-second call was placed from Kimberly Camm's cell phone. Who she called, and what was said, is permanently unknown. The contents of that call were destroyed by law enforcement misconduct before they could be recovered. That destruction will come up again later, because it needs to. Medical examiners would later calculate, based on the physical state of the bodies and the degree of serum separation in the pooled blood on the garage floor, that the time of death was approximately 8 p.m. At 8 p.m., David Camm was at Georgetown Community Church. 11 people were there with him. At approximately 9:20 p.m., the games ended. David drove home. He pressed the garage door opener as he pulled into the driveway. The door rose. He found Kim on the garage floor. He found Jill in the back seat of the Ford Bronco. He found Bradley, stretched toward the rear cargo area, still warm, and performed CPR until there was no question left to answer. The cause of death for all 3 victims was execution-style gunshot wounds from a handgun. Kimberly and Jill were each shot in the head. Bradley sustained a fatal gunshot wound to the chest. The weapon was never recovered. A multi-day excavation of a subdivision lake 12 miles from the scene in September 2005 produced nothing. At the scene, investigators documented 2 things that did not fit any straightforward narrative of the crime. The first was Kim's shoes and socks, which had been removed from her feet and placed neatly on the roof of the Bronco, side by side, toes pointing outward. Her white pants had also been removed. The coroner's report noted bruising and abrasions on the tops of both of Kim's feet, marks consistent with her shoes having been forcibly handled while she was still alive. Nobody offered a satisfactory explanation for any of this on the night of September 28, 2000. The second anomaly was the gray sweatshirt, found on the garage floor beside Bradley's body, not belonging to David, Kim, or either child. Indiana Department of Corrections issue, as it would eventually be confirmed, bearing a DOC inmate tracking number and the nickname Backbone written inside the collar in faded black marker. That sweatshirt went into an evidence bag. The bag was sealed. It would not be properly examined for nearly 5 years. Floyd County Prosecutor Stan Faith arrived at the scene around 10 p.m. He looked at the garage. He looked at David Camm, a former state trooper, standing in blood-soaked clothing, inconsolable. And within the first hours of the investigation, without announcement, a decision was made. David Camm was not a person of interest to be eliminated. He was the suspect. From that moment, the investigation would be constructed around proving that conclusion. To anchor the case scientifically, Faith sought out Rod Englert, an Oregon-based forensic consultant. Englert was unavailable and sent his assistant, Robert Stites. Detective Jim Niemeyer, a senior investigator assigned to the case, looked at Stites and expressed his concerns directly to supervisors. This man did not appear qualified to be working a homicide scene. He was told to stand down. Stites stayed. Stites examined David's basketball shirt. He identified 8 blood dots near the front left hem, each less than 1 millimeter in diameter, and he delivered a conclusion that became the foundation of the entire prosecution. He classified them as high-velocity impact spatter, VIS, the microscopic mist produced when a bullet strikes a body at close range and blood travels backward toward the shooter. He stated he was 100% certain the only way those stains get on a shirt, Stites told investigators, is from blowback from a gunshot wound. This is scientific documentation. He kept going. He identified petroleum-based stains on the garage door as VIS. He pointed to the natural serum separation visible in the pooled blood, a standard biological process, and told investigators someone had used a high pH cleaning agent before police arrived. David had tried to clean the scene, Stites said. He had panicked, tried to wash it away, and given up. Every surface Stites pointed at became another nail. Investigators built the arrest warrant around his conclusions. On October 1, 2000, 3 days after the murders, David Camm was handcuffed and charged with 3 counts of murder. There was, however, a problem the state could not make disappear. David had an alibi, not a vague one, not an approximation, but 11 independent human beings who placed him at Georgetown Community Church from approximately 7 p.m. until 9:22 p.m., the night his family was killed. None of them saw him leave. None of them noticed blood on his clothing. Not one of them wavered when questioned. Faced with this corroboration, prosecutors adapted their theory. During a stretch when the uneven number of players required David to sit out, he had slipped out of the gymnasium, driven home, committed 3 murders, and returned without a single one of those 11 men noticing his absence. The window required to execute this theory was extraordinarily narrow. The driving time alone consumed the majority of it. A phone record appeared to support the prosecution's claim that David was not where he said he was. A call from the Camm residence had been timestamped at 7:19 p.m. after basketball had allegedly started. That timestamp collapsed under scrutiny. Indiana's state boundaries crossed 2 time zones, and the phone company's billing system had logged the call 1 hour incorrectly. The actual time of the call was 6:19 p.m., a full hour before basketball began. David had called a customer before leaving the house. Routine, unremarkable, and not evidence of anything. With the timeline failing and the alibi intact, investigators turned to David's personal life. What they found had no bearing on the question of who killed his family. Over the course of his marriage, David had been unfaithful. The state documented approximately a dozen women, a group that, as would later be established in the appellate record, included women with whom David had affairs and women he had merely propositioned and been rejected by. Having affairs does not make a person a murderer. The prosecution knew that. What it does in a courtroom is make a jury stop caring about the evidence. If you are still with this case, you already understand what is at stake here, not just for David Camm, but for what the system is supposed to guarantee. Subscribe if you haven't. The next case is already below this one. Meanwhile, the gray sweatshirt sat in a sealed evidence bag. The prosecution had told the defense that the DNA recovered from it had been submitted to the FBI's CODIS database and returned no match. That claim was false. Following the reversal of the first conviction in August 2004, David's defense team pushed. They filed motions. They demanded the DNA be formally resubmitted to CODIS under court supervision. The prosecution resisted at every step. It required a direct court order to force the submission through. The match came back. What you are about to hear is not a theory. It is a documented forensic record. Stay with it. Male DNA on the sweatshirt collar matched Charles Darnell Boney. His genetic profile had been in the CODIS system since 1997. The sweatshirt itself was confirmed as Indiana Department of Corrections issue. It bore Boney's DOC inmate number and his prison nickname, Backbone, written inside the collar. The evidence had identified him from the beginning. No one had looked. On March 4, 2005, a latent palm print recovered from the exterior passenger side of Kim Camm's Ford Bronco was formally matched to Charles Boney. He was arrested on March 5, 2005. Charles Darnell Boney had a documented criminal history that fit the staging of the Camm crime scene with specificity that could not be coincidental. Since 1989, Boney had been convicted of 3 counts of armed robbery, 3 counts of criminal confinement with a deadly weapon, and multiple robbery counts resulting in bodily injury. He served 7 years of a 20-year sentence. The nature of his offenses was consistent and particular. Boney targeted women, stalked them, called them beforehand to ask what they were wearing, specifically whether they had on heeled shoes, then cornered them at gunpoint. He did not want their money. He wanted their footwear. He had a documented violent fixation on women's feet and shoes that law enforcement had cataloged across multiple victims and multiple incidents. He was released on parole months before the September 28, 2000 murders. Now returned to the crime scene. Kimberly Camm's shoes had been removed from her feet while she was alive. The bruising and abrasions on the tops of both feet confirmed this, and placed with precision on the roof of the Bronco. Her white pants had also been removed. The pathology of the scene matched Boney's documented behavior exactly. He had left his calling card on the roof of that vehicle, and for nearly 5 years, investigators looked directly at it and saw nothing. When Boney was first brought in for questioning after the DNA match, he said he had never met David Camm and had no connection to the murders. He claimed the sweatshirt had been donated to a charity box after his release from prison. He agreed to a polygraph. The results indicated deception. He was released. 2 weeks later, his palm print came back on the Bronco. He was arrested, and his story began to move. Over the course of approximately 35 hours of recorded interrogations, Boney provided at least 5 conflicting accounts. Criminologist Dr. Kim Rosmo, who reviewed 200 hours of case materials, including the interrogation recordings, testified at the third trial that Boney had not been treated as a suspect during these sessions. Detectives fed him details, suggested frameworks, and allowed him to revise his account when it conflicted with established facts. When his proposed timeline contradicted the confirmed record, Kim and the children had been seen alive at the pool until 7:15 p.m. His story quietly shifted to accommodate it. The version Boney eventually settled on was this. He had met David Camm on a basketball court by chance. David had asked him to acquire an untraceable gun. Boney obtained the weapon, wrapped it in his gray sweatshirt, and delivered it to the Camm residence on the night of September 28. He claimed he was outside when the murders occurred, heard gunfire, and when David emerged, David pointed the gun at him and said he had done this. The gun jammed. Boney ran. Then came the detail that no investigator pressed him on, because pressing him would have required acknowledging what it meant. Boney claimed that as he fled the scene in a panic, he tripped over Kim's shoes on the garage floor. And so, mid-flight from a triple homicide, he paused, picked up the shoes, walked to the Bronco, and set them neatly on the roof. The coroner's report had already answered what actually happened to those shoes. The bruising on Kim's feet told that story, and it was not the story of a man tripping in the dark. Mala Singh Mattingly, Boney's girlfriend at the time, gave investigators a different account entirely. On the night of September 28, 2000, Boney left their home saying he was going to help a friend. He returned after midnight. He was breathing hard, sweating through his clothes, and had a scraped knee. He showed her a gun. Investigators later concluded that weapon was almost certainly the murder weapon, which has never been recovered. Mattingly left him 2 weeks later. She told investigators she believed something had broken in him. Floyd County prosecutors could not accommodate what this evidence meant without also admitting what their original investigation had been. So instead of reconsidering, they reframed. Charles Boney was arrested and offered a choice: face a triple homicide charge alone, or cooperate, and named David Camm as the man who hired him. Boney cooperated. He was convicted of murder and conspiracy on January 26, 2006, and sentenced to 225 years. His direct appeal was denied in January 2008. He remains incarcerated. One additional detail did not receive adequate explanation at the time. Stan Faith, the prosecutor who had built the original case against David Camm, had a pre-existing personal relationship with Boney's mother. She brought baked goods to his office and used him as a professional reference. This relationship was not disclosed during the original prosecution. When Boney was arrested in 2005, his first call was to Stan Faith. He wanted Faith to represent him as his defense attorney. The court rejected the request immediately given the conflict of interest. David Camm stood trial 3 times. Each trial exposed a different layer of what had gone wrong in the original investigation. The first trial, January 2002, Robert Stites took the stand in January 2002 and introduced himself to the jury as a crime scene reconstructionist pursuing a master's degree and a doctoral candidacy in fluid dynamics, with a background conducting homicide investigations for the United States Army, Naval Intelligence, and the FBI. Prosecutor Stan Faith addressed him as professor in open court. Rod Englert, the senior analyst, followed and confirmed every finding. 2 experts, 1 conclusion. The 8 dots were gunshot blowback, and David Camm had been standing within feet of his daughter when she was shot. The defense fought directly. Their bloodstain analyst, Bart Epstein, argued the 8 dots were contact transfer stains deposited when David leaned across the back seat to reach Bradley, brushing his shirt against Jill's blood-soaked hair. To demonstrate this mechanically, Epstein soaked a wig in blood and dragged a t-shirt across it in the same motion. The resulting pattern was nearly identical to the 8 dots the prosecution called gunshot evidence. Then the state called approximately a dozen women to establish David's pattern of marital infidelity, a group that, as the appeals court would later document, included women with whom David had affairs, and women he had only propositioned. Story after story, the jury listened. The 11 alibi witnesses testified. Every one of them placed David at the church from 7 p.m. past 9 p.m. Not one wavered. The prosecution's answer was that they were either covering for David or had simply missed his departure. On March 17, 2002, the jury returned guilty on 3 counts of murder. David Camm was sentenced to 195 years. In August 2004, the Indiana Court of Appeals overturned the conviction. The ruling was direct. The admission of the affair witnesses, without any evidentiary connection between those affairs and the murders, had violated David's right to a fair trial. The prejudicial value had far outweighed any probative purpose. New trial ordered. The second trial, January 17, 2006. The affair witnesses were gone. The appellate court had closed that door. Prosecutor Keith Henderson needed a new motive. He introduced testimony suggesting David had been mistreating his 5-year-old daughter and committed the murders to conceal it. The defense's medical examiner testified under oath that there was no physical evidence or medical basis of any kind to support this claim. The Indiana Supreme Court would later describe the theory as relying on inference upon inference in violation of Evidence Rule 404-P. What the jury did not know was what was happening outside the courtroom. Lynn Scammahorn, a forensic DNA criminalist with the Indiana State Police who had run approximately 300 tests across the full body of crime scene evidence, testified that during the first trial, Faith had pulled her aside during a recess, cursed at her, and demanded she testify that David Camm's DNA was present on the sweatshirt. He was not there. She refused. She testified about this in open court and broke down on the stand. Fingerprint analyst John Singleton testified separately that Faith had pressured him to minimize his findings about the unidentified palm print, the one later confirmed as Boney's. 2 forensic analysts. 2 documented attempts at coercion. 1 prosecutor. Before this verdict, 1 question. After everything you have just heard, the DNA, the palm print, the shoe evidence, the girlfriend's account, do you think it is still possible for a jury to convict? Stay with this. On March 3, 2006, the jury returned guilty again. Life without the possibility of parole. The system had now convicted the same man twice. The evidence pointing to another suspect was not hidden. It had been introduced in open court. The jury convicted him anyway. While David Camm sat in his cell, it emerged that Keith Henderson had signed a book deal during the prosecution. A literary representation agreement had been executed in his wife's name hours before the second guilty verdict. Henderson had already received in advance and written portions of the manuscript. When the defense discovered this, they filed to have him removed. Henderson fought it. The Indiana Court of Appeals formally removed him from the case in November 2011. The Indiana Supreme Court issued a formal public reprimand for professional misconduct. David Camm lost approximately 2 additional years of his life to that process. In 2009, the Indiana Supreme Court vacated the second conviction, citing the baseless abuse theory and the evidentiary violations. A third trial was ordered. This time, it would not be held in Floyd County. The third trial, Lebanon, Indiana, 2013. The venue change mattered. So did the 13 years of accumulated record. The defense brought the basketball shirt under high-powered microscopy. What the examination revealed was definitive. Fabric fibers were trapped inside the dried blood drops. Fabric fibers do not appear inside a blood drop that has traveled through air. They appear when fabric makes physical contact with a blood-soaked surface. The shirt had brushed against Jill's hair when David leaned across the back seat. The blood had transferred by contact, exactly as David had said from the first night. Then the defense introduced what it had uncovered about Robert Stites. Stites took the stand and admitted everything. He had no advanced degree. He had never been enrolled in any doctoral program in fluid dynamics. He had in fact failed an undergraduate chemistry course during his economics degree. He had never processed a homicide scene involving fresh blood before the night he walked into the Camm garage on September 28, 2000. Every credential he had presented to 2 juries was fabricated. Federal Appellate Review had already confirmed that Stan Faith knew this and had privately coached Stites through basic scientific methods prior to his testimony to ensure his presentation would be credible. On October 24, 2013, after more than 13 years, the jury in Lebanon, Indiana, deliberated and returned a verdict of not guilty. David Camm had been incarcerated for 13 years for murders committed by a man whose DNA, fingerprints, prison sweatshirt, and behavioral signature were present at the scene before the investigation was 24 hours old. David Camm sought civil redress through federal litigation. In 2016, Floyd County agreed to a $450,000 settlement. In 2022, the state of Indiana paid $4.6 million to resolve his Fourth Amendment wrongful arrest and due process claims. He also received undisclosed financial settlements from the insurance carriers, representing the forensic experts who whose fabricated and coerced testimonies had driven his convictions. Stan Faith died in 2019. He was never formally disciplined, investigated, or charged for his conduct in the Camm case. Keith Henderson was never criminally charged. Robert Stites, who admitted under oath to committing perjury in 2 separate murder trials, was never criminally indicted for perjury or obstruction of justice. Myron Wilkerson, the ISP detective who removed Kim Camm's cell phone from evidence without authorization, retained it for 2 months, and returned it entirely wiped of fingerprints and digital data, died before the 3rd trial. He was never charged. Charles Boney remains incarcerated, serving 225 years. His direct appeal was denied in January 2008. He has continued to maintain that David Camm was involved in the murders. After everything the 3 trials produced, that claim has no verified support. What remains unknown? The contents of the 13-second call Kim Camm placed at 7:50 p.m. on September 28, 2000, are gone. Who she called, and what she said in the final minutes before she came home, was destroyed and cannot be recovered. The murder weapon has never been found. What Boney did with it, and where it is not established in the verified record. The precise sequence of events inside the Camm garage on the night of September 28, 2000, exists in the record only through Boney's multiple and contradictory accounts, Mala Singh Mattingly's observations of his return home, and the physical evidence. No complete and verified reconstruction of the events has been established. Boney's motive, beyond his documented pathology, was never definitively established at trial in a form that answered every open question. There is a version of this story where everything breaks the right way. The sweatshirt goes into CODIS on October 1, 2000. A DOC inmate number is matched to a name within hours. A detective looks at the shoes on the roof of a Bronco, looks at the record of a man who has spent 11 years fixated on women's shoes, and connects what is in front of him. David Camm is never arrested. His children's murders are solved. That version did not happen. What happened instead is that a system under pressure to produce an answer produced the wrong one, and then spent 13 years defending it. 2 forensic analysts were coerced and refused. A phone was wiped. A book deal was signed. A man with a fabricated resume testified twice in a murder case. A prosecutor died without ever facing consequences for any of it. Kimberly Camm was 35 years old. Bradley was 7. Jill was 5. They deserved a system that looked at the evidence. All of it. If this case stayed with you, subscribe and leave a comment below. Do you believe Charles Boney acted alone? And do you think, if the sweatshirt DNA had been run in 2000, David Camm is ever arrested at all? We read every response.